Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Remember earlier this month when Sony shut down that totally rejected video game named Concord? I released a video about it back on September 5th, and you might be surprised by just how much money was spent to develop the game. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please leave a comment, please subscribe to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! On September 20th, the comicbook.com website released an article entitled, "Concord reportedly cost record-breaking $400 million. PlayStation thought it was the next Star Wars." Clearly, they were quite misguided and self-deceived. And the article reads, "According to a new report, Concord was an even bigger flop than we thought." The latest unofficial information about the game comes from Colin Moriarty, who is the founder of Last Stand Media, a former IGN journalist and one of the leading experts on PlayStation in the industry. According to Moriarty, Concord cost $400 million to make, start to finish, the most expensive game in PlayStation history. And it was given this budget because Sony thought it was going to be absolutely massive. And the only thing that was massive about it was its cost. 8 years ago, gamers might have been somewhat interested in this game, but not today. Moriarty said, quote, "Someone who worked on Concord reached out to me. I verified who this person was and talked to this person extensively. Concord cost about $400 million. Now, I know that some people don't believe that Sony could have spent $400 million to develop Concord, and had this game been developed for a much shorter amount of time, then I might be inclined to agree. But since the game was in development for 8 years, that means that on average, around $50 million was spent annually in development costs. And when you consider that the average annual salary for video game designers is around $103,800, and for video game developers it's around $108,500, if 80% of that $400 million budget was spent on salaries alone, splitting it 50-50 between designers and developers, we can estimate that a total of around 377 designers and developers were involved on an annual basis. And since that's not an unreasonable number, that means that a $400 million development cost is also not an unreasonable number. Moriarty continues, revealing that PlayStation began working with Firewalk Studios on Concord back in 2020, though development on the game had begun before this. This was just when it caught the eye of PlayStation, who decided to get involved. How it ended up costing $400 million involves PlayStation having to outsource much of its development, which can, and in this case was, a very expensive undertaking late in the game's development. It's unclear how much of the $400 million came straight from the pockets of Sony, as it wasn't involved from the beginning of the game's development, but at $400 million, it is the most expensive game ever released under the PlayStation umbrella. And spending that kind of money to develop a product is no guarantee that the product is going to be successful. It just vastly increases the risk. Moriarty continues, revealing that the game grossed just $1 million, which means that it lost that entire $400 million budget, which also makes it the biggest loss ever for PlayStation. As you can tell by a loss of this size, PlayStation clearly had no idea this was coming. And that's their own fault for not conducting any market research to determine how much interest there would be for the game. That's just basic business common sense, which Sony and Firewalk Studios failed to utilize. According to Moriarty, Concord was, quote, heavily championed behind the scenes, unquote. Probably by woke identity politics activists who had convinced themselves and management that a ginormous modern audience of gamers couldn't wait to play the game. But that modern audience completely failed to materialize. In fact, Moriarty claims that Sony viewed verbatim that, quote, Concord was the future of PlayStation, unquote. Quote, they had such major ambition for this game that it was internally referred to as a Star Wars-like project for Sony, that it could be repeatedly revisited over and over and over again, unquote. The biggest problem with the video game industry today is that it's completely out of touch with what its customers want. They fully embraced woke identity politics, and Concord was a woke game, but the fact of the matter is when any business makes little effort to create products that consumers actually want, then not only will those unwanted products fail, the companies creating them could potentially go out of business. Obviously, Sony isn't going to go out of business because of Concord, but it definitely needs to rethink its video game development priorities. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.